Snow blew across the ambulance bay, blurring the red strobes into a smear of color. Cars crept through the lot of St. Mary's Medical Center, wipers on high tires whispering over slush. Each time the automatic doors at the emergency entrance slid open, cold air spilled into the lobby and made the fake Christmas tree by the wall shiver. Inside, the air was too warm and smelled like coffee and bleach. Children coughed, a baby cried off, and on someone in a heavy coat complained to the clerk about how long he had been waiting. The doors sighed open again. Ava Lane stepped in with her shoulders tucked head down against the wind. Snow dotted the sleeves of her faded parka. Her scrub pants were washed out green, her sneakers scuffed pale gray. A canvas bag hung from her shoulder. Near the zipper, a small patch was sewn on green and tan thread, dulled almost to one color. One corner of the stitching had started to fray. Ava's gloved fingers settled for a beat on the strap, then dropped as she pushed back her hood. "Evening, Ms. Lane," the security guard said, without looking up from his log sheet. "Evening," she answered. She moved through the lobby at a steady pace, weaving past wheelchairs and winter boots without touching anyone. Her eyes passed over the waiting room, the corridor, to imaging the red exit sign at the far end of the hall. Then she slipped through the staff-only door into the employee corridor. At the nurse's station inside, the brightest light came from a phone. "Oh, there she is," Kylie Hart said. "Miss Mystery Scrub." She tilted her screen toward the two men beside her. On it, a photo from last week showed Ava half turned away from the camera canvas bag in view. Trent Mason, Navy scrubs, crisp and new, squinted at the image. "She looks like she lives in that bag," he said. "Travel nurse." "Right." Miguel Santos rested his elbows on the counter, a tiny gimbal in his palm. The camera lens tracked his smallest movement. "Could be a whole series," he said. "Christmas Eve at St. Mary's, featuring our walking donation bin." Kylie laughed softly. "Episode 1, she said. How to dress like the before picture." The staff hallway door clicked open. Ava stepped out, parka folded over her arm now. Her scrub top was deep teal, faded at the seams, her hair pulled into a low knot. She crossed to the time clock, tapped her badge to the reader, and waited for the green light. Lane Trent called. "Roads that bad, or did your car lose a fight with a snowbank?" Ava looked over, eyes tired but clear. "Snow's heavy," she said. "Highway's slick." Kylie gave an exaggerated gasp. "She speaks," she stage whispered. Miguel lifted the gimbal, the camera eye turning toward Ava. "Give us a wave, Ava," he said. "Holiday shift content." Ava adjusted the strap of her bag. "Please don't film me," she said. "Relax," Kylie answered. "He is just messing around." Ava's expression did not change. She started past the desk toward the med room. As she went by, the corner of her bag brushed the counter. Kylie reached out and flicked the patch near the zipper with 2 fingers. "Where'd you get this?" she asked. "Army surplus." Ava stopped. The pause was small but solid. She turned her head enough to meet Kylie's eyes. "Please don't touch the bag," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it landed clear. Kylie rolled her eyes and leaned back in her chair. "Okay," she said. "Classified snack stash. Got it." Miguel's camera was still pointed their way. Trent tapped his pen against the counter. Ava did not answer. She moved the bag so it rested against her other hip, out of reach, and kept walking. Her sneakers squeaked once on the polished floor and then faded down the hall. Farther along the corridor, a door stood open to a small room lit by monitor glow. Inside, 3 screens showed slices of the hospital. The waiting room, the main hall, the ambulance bay where snow blurred the edges of the world. Marcus Reed sat in a worn office chair, a paper cup of coffee cooling by his hand. The radio beside him was talking about whiteout conditions when the sound of laughter from the nurse's station cut through the weather report. He nudged one of the camera views. The frame slid along the hall and settled over the workstation. Kylie's head was tipped back in a laugh. Trent leaned on his elbows. Miguel's little camera sat in his hand. On the edge of the image, Ava's profile was visible, canvas bag strap crossing her chest. Marcus zoomed in. The small patch near her shoulder came into focus, its faded emblem just clear enough to read if you already knew what it was. He did. Even blurred by the fluorescent glare, the shape of it tugged at a memory he had pushed deep snow on rock and a calm voice over a hissing radio. On the monitor, Ava paused outside the med room. Her stance was relaxed, but even feet under her shoulders, weight centered. An orderly with an IV pole hustled past, and her gaze flicked to him, then to the swinging doors from the ambulance bay, then to the red exit sign at the end of the hall. Check, check, check. Marcus wrapped his hand around the coffee cup. Somewhere beyond the walls, a siren began to rise through the storm, its distant wail sliding toward the hospital like a thread pulled tight. The siren that Marcus heard outside climbed higher, then broke off as the ambulance slid into the bay. On the monitor in front of him, 2 paramedics swung open the back doors. Cold air puffed into the frame. They eased a stretcher down wheels, clattering over the wet concrete. Out in the corridor, the doors from the bay flared open on a gust of snow and exhaust. Ava stepped out of an exam room at the same moment, snapping a pair of gloves off her hands. Her hair had come loose in a few strands around her face, but her eyes were sharp. The paramedics pushed their stretcher toward her. One of them called out the report as they rolled. 57 chest pain, started an hour ago, pressure in the center, blood pressure, borderline, no clear ST elevation so far. Ava was already moving beside the gurney. She laid a hand on the patient's shoulder. "You are at St. Mary's," she said. "My name is Ava. We are going to take care of you. Can you tell me your name?" The man's voice was thin, but he answered. While he spoke, Ava glanced at the monitor, noted the rate, the rhythm, the oxygen. Her other hand adjusted the nasal cannula with a touch that looked almost casual. She walked backward as they rolled, guiding the stretcher into an open bay. She shifted the monitor cords without tangling them, slid the rail down with one smooth motion, helped the man over to the hospital bed. By the time the physician stepped in, Ava already had a blood pressure cuff inflating and a nitro tablet ready, waiting for the order. As soon as that patient was stable enough to hand off, she was out in the hall again. A teenage girl sat curled in a chair near the nurse's station, hands twisted in the hem of her sweatshirt. Her breathing was fast and shallow. The triage nurse had placed a wristband on her and moved on. The girl's mother stood nearby, whispering useless reassurances. Ava crouched down so her eyes were level with the girl's. "Hard to breathe?" she asked. The girl nodded, eyes wide. Ava held up her own hand, fingers spread. She took a slow breath, in then out. "Match me," she said. "Like this. In for 3, out for 4. Watch my hand." The girl stared at her palm and tried. Her shoulders shook, but after a few cycles, the air going in and out of her chest sounded less ragged. Ava smiled once, small but real. "You are doing fine," she said. "I will let the doctor know you are ready to be seen." By the printers, Trent tossed a chart onto the counter and watched the scene for a moment. "Anxiety queen," he muttered, reaching for the bottle of sanitizer. "She will be back by New Year's at this rate." Kylie clicked her mouse eyes on her computer screen. "Easy hours," she replied. At least she picked a good holiday to freak out. Ava moved on to another room. An elderly woman sat on the edge of her bed, clutching a handbag like it was a life raft. "We are not taking that," Ava said gently. "We are just going to put it in the cabinet for you, so no one walks off with it while we work." The woman's fingers loosened, and Ava set the bag aside, tucking a blanket around frail knees with a practiced tuck. In and out of rooms, in and out of the harsh white light, her pace stayed steady. She lifted a heavy chart for an older nurse whose wrist was wrapped. She picked up a dropped pill cup before anyone stepped on it. She adjusted an oxygen mask that had slipped under a patient's nose while the man slept. At the station, Miguel watched her for a stretch longer than usual, his camera resting unused on the counter. "She never stops," he said. "For what she gets paid," Kylie replied. "She can jog these halls all night." It was almost midnight when the short break came. The staff lounge sat at the end of a side corridor, a narrow room with mismatched chairs and a flickering vending machine. Someone had taped cardboard snowflakes to the microwave. A small television in the corner showed weather radar in pulsing shades of blue and purple over the state. Ava walked in with her canvas bag on her shoulder and a paper cup from the coffee machine tucked in her hand. The room hummed with low conversation. A respiratory therapist stood in front of the microwave, waiting for leftovers to spin. Kylie sat at the end of the table, scrolling on her phone. Trent and Miguel occupied the other side, hunched over a box of donuts. Ava set her bag down on a chair against the wall near the door. She sat beside it and wrapped both hands around the warm cup. Kylie glanced over. Her eyes moved to the patch on the bag, then up to Ava's face. "You really bring that thing everywhere," she said. "Even into the lounge." "It has my stuff in it," Ava replied. "That is all." Trent leaned back, chewing. "Looks like it came out of a movie about the 90s, he said. "Did you find it in a storage unit?" Miguel wiped sugar from his fingers and stood. He walked past Ava's chair on the way to the vending machine, and as he did, he hooked his fingers lightly under the strap of her bag, lifting it an inch. "How much do you think this weighs?" he asked, turning his head toward Trent. 25 pounds. The bag shifted, the canvas creaked, the patch tilted. Ava set her cup down without spilling and placed her hand flat on the side of the bag. "Put it down, please," she said. No edge, no raised volume, just a note of steel in the middle of the words. Miguel froze, then lowered the bag back to the seat. "I was kidding," he said. "Relax." Ava's hand stayed there for a second longer, palm pressed over the patch. Then she picked up her coffee again. Outside the lounge, a chime sounded in the corridor ceiling, followed by the clear voice of the hospital's overhead system. "Attention staff. Due to worsening winter storm conditions, all non-essential outpatient services are suspended until further notice. Emergency department remains open." The respiratory therapist sighed and shook his head. The microwaved leftovers beeped. On the television screen, the band of intense color over the interstate thickened. Great, Kylie muttered. Snowpocalypse. And we get to be here for the whole show. Trent jabbed a thumb toward the ceiling. Highways are a mess already, he said. My uncle just texted that state police are shutting down parts of the pass. Miguel sat back down, stretching his legs. At least they cannot call us in early if we are already here, he said. Ava watched the radar loop for a moment. The swirling blue mass over the city looked a little like a storm she had seen once on another monitor in a tent far away. 2 different continents, 2 different lives. Same slow spin of trouble on a screen. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She took it out and glanced at the lock screen. A message from Dad. Porch light is on. No rush, just get here safe. Ava breathed out through her nose. The warmth from the coffee cup seeped into her fingers into the small ache at the base of her thumb that flared when the weather turned cold. She typed back a short reply. Still at work. Roads are bad. I will text when I am on my way. She slid the phone away as the overhead voice came again. All emergency and critical care staff, please confirm ability to stay beyond scheduled shift if needed. Report to your charge nurse. The room quieted. Of course, Kylie said under her breath. Of course they asked that right now. Trent stared at his donut, no longer hungry. Miguel reached for his camera out of habit, then left it on the table. Ava finished the last swallow of coffee and picked up her bag. See you out there, she said. No one answered, but all 3 watched as she walked out into the hall, the old canvas swinging lightly at her side as the storm gathered its strength against the glass. The hall outside the lounge hummed with a low, steady noise like the hospital itself was bracing for the storm. Ava stepped back into it, the strap of her bag settled across her shoulder again. The air tasted faintly of coffee sanitizer and the metallic hint of snow that had slipped inside each time the ambulance doors opened. She left her bag in the small locker room, spinning the dial with fingers that remembered a dozen other locks, then walked back toward the nurse's station. Her badge clipped against her scrub top with each step. The waiting room beyond the glass wall was fuller now. Coats draped over chairs, boots clustered around table legs, people sleeping upright with mouths open. The television above the reception desk had shifted from holiday movie to local news. A banner at the bottom of the screen read, Winter Storm Warning in block letters. At the station, Kylie tapped her nails against her keyboard. Trent flipped through charts. Miguel sat on a stool, spinning slowly with the toe of one shoe camera in his lap. Here she comes, Kylie murmured, not quite under her breath. Ava did not seem to hear. She walked behind the counter, picked up a stack of wristbands, checked them, and set them in the correct order. Her eyes moved over the census board that showed each room and bed, then went to the triage list. Anything still waiting a long time, she asked. Kylie shrugged. The elderly man with the cough is at 2 hours. The kid with fever is at 90 minutes. Anxiety girl is pacing, but her vitals are fine. Ava nodded, taking it in without argument. She picked up a folder and headed toward the waiting room. The doors to the waiting area sighed open for her. The noise changed less controlled than the halls full of television sound, and multiple conversations layered together. A toddler wailed as his mother tried to pin his arm still for a temperature check. An older woman grumbled to herself about parking fees. Near the Christmas tree, a boy in an oversized sweatshirt sat on the floor, rolling a glass snow globe between his palms. Inside the globe, a little plastic cabin sat under a spray of white flakes. Each time the globe rolled, the fake snow swirled around it. Ava checked in first, with the man who had been coughing, listening to his chest, making sure he was not deteriorating. She talked quietly with the mother of the feverish child, answered a question about dosing, adjusted a blanket. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed the boy with the snow globe move closer to the low table in the center of the room. His sneakers squeaked faintly on the tile. He rolled the globe again a little harder this time. It hit the leg of the table and wobbled. His fingers missed when he grabbed for it. The globe slipped away, picked up speed across the polished floor, and headed straight toward the leg of a chair where a baby carrier rested. The baby inside was asleep. Its tiny head was pillowed near the edge of the seat, soft skull, vulnerable. Someone sucked in a breath. An adult hand reached out too far away to catch anything. Ava was already moving. There was no dramatic sprint. One moment she was standing beside a chair, checking a pulse. The next she had shifted her weight forward and dropped into a smooth, controlled reach. Her hand slid across the tile fingers, aimed not at where the globe was, but where it was about to be. Glass met skin before it could hit the metal chair leg. Her fingertips curled just enough to cradle it. The momentum rocked her wrist, then stopped. The snow globe sat in her palm, fake flakes drifting down inside around the plastic cabin. The baby slept on unaware. The boy stared mouth open. Behind the glass wall, Trent had one hand halfway up pointing. Kylie froze mid-scroll. Miguel's eyes widened. Ava rose to her feet in one easy motion. She walked back to the boy and crouched in front of him, placing the globe gently in his hands. Careful with this, she said. Gravity is not always on your side. His cheeks reddened. Yes, ma'am, he whispered. A woman who had been watching smiled at Ava, then tucked her own purse closer to her feet without quite knowing why. Ava gave a brief nod and moved on. At the nurse's station, Miguel blinked hard. "Did you see that?" he asked. See what Kylie said, but the edge in her voice had dulled. "She went full ninja on that thing," he said. "No one is that fast." Trent shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Lucky timing," he muttered. Miguel looked unconvinced. His fingers toyed with the gimbal without turning it on. In the security room, the scene had played out in grainy resolution across Marcus's screen. He rewinded the feed a few seconds and watched again. There was Ava standing upright, posture loose, but balanced. There was the snow globe starting its slide. Without any visible flinch, her head turned, body rotated, and she reached. The ease of it scratched at old recognition. Marcus had seen hands move like that in doorways and alleys, catching sliding weapons, snatching up loose radios before they hit rock, grabbing a teammate's vest before he stepped into a line of fire. He leaned back in his chair. His own hand curled around the radio at his belt, feeling the familiar shape. In the hall, Ava returned to the station. She picked up a pen, wrote a quick note on the triage sheet about the boy with the anxiety symptoms and his improving breathing. Her sleeve slipped back a little as she wrote. Kylie, watching without meaning, caught a glimpse of pale lines on the inside of Ava's forearm, not the straight, neat path of a surgical scar. These were small and scattered, like something had bitten or burned and healed slowly. Ava finished the note and tugged the sleeve down, a small, automatic correction. "What happened to your arm?" Kylie asked. Ava capped the pen. "Kitchen accidents," she said. She did not smile, but she did not flash irritation either. Her tone made it clear she was not taking follow-up questions. Trent snorted, as if the tension needed somewhere to go. "Guess you should stay away from the knives," he said. Miguel did not laugh this time. His gaze shifted from Ava's covered wrist to the old patch on her locker bag, now half visible through the small glass inset in the locker room door. On the news channel in the lobby, the meteorologist gestured at a deep swirl of clouds over the region. Highways were closing. Visibility was dropping. People were being told to stay home if they could. No one at St. Mary's was going anywhere. Another ambulance pulled into the bay, then another. The sirens sounded flatter, now muffled by the snow. Nurses moved through the corridor in a steady stream, pushing carts, carrying charts, calling out lab values. Ava stocked a supply cart without being asked, tucking extra syringes and gauze rolls where she knew she would want them later. She refilled the glove dispenser by the trauma room door. She checked expiration dates in the crash cart and replaced a vial without making a big deal of it. Even when she stood still for a few seconds, she did not look idle. Her eyes moved, tracking. Fire exit clear, wheelchair left in the hall, someone might trip. Visitor standing too close to a doorway where stretchers needed room to pass. Her attention touched each thing, then moved on. In the security room, Marcus watched those small movements and matched them against the frayed edges in his memory. Cold air in his throat, a valley shaped like a bowl, radio voices layered over one another. "Reed, move your team back. The ridge is not stable." He blinked the voice away and focused on the present. On the monitor, Ava lifted a box from a lower shelf, without twisting her back knees, bending just enough to conserve energy. When she stood again, she rolled her shoulders once as if easing an old ache. In the break between ambulance arrivals, she slipped back into an empty exam room to wash her hands. The motion under the faucet was automatic. Wet soap scrub between fingers, backs of hands, wrists. When she reached under the paper towel dispenser, the cuff of her sleeve rode up higher than it had before. Ink showed against her skin, dark and precise near the inside of her forearm, not the bright looping script of a trendy tattoo. This was small and sharply defined, a minimalist tab design, the outline of a shape that to most people would mean nothing at all. To someone who knew what to look for, it meant training and nights in the field and a standard that did not show up on license plates or bumper stickers. Ava dried her hands, folded the towel, tossed it, then tugged the sleeve back down. Out in the hall, the fluorescent lights hummed. Snow pressed at the windows in thick sheets, soft and relentless. The red exit signs over each door glowed in their steady way, small islands of color in the white glare. From the ambulance bay, another siren approached, through the storm, closer and closer, until it merged with the hospital's own rhythm. The next ambulance hit the bay, a little harder than the last. The impact shook the doors in their tracks and sent a faint shiver through the corridor floor. Cold rushed in when they opened, carrying the smell of exhaust and wet wool. Ava stepped out of an exam room where she had just settled a child with a sprained wrist. She peeled off her gloves as she walked, dropping them into a red biohazard bin and reaching for a fresh pair. The nurse's station buzzed. The charge nurse stood over the assignment board with a dry erase marker clenched in one fist, talking through room numbers and names faster than the ink could dry. "We are out of beds," she said. "Hallway spots only. I want eyes on every chest pain and every trouble breather. Nobody waits alone." Ava took her place near the entrance to the main hall. She pulled on her gloves, flexing her fingers until the latex snapped snug at her wrists. Her gaze swept the corridor once, then moved to the waiting room again. In the far corner beneath a muted wall, sconce an older man sat with his shoulders slumped. His coat lay over his lap. His face had a gray cast that did not match the bright red scarf around his neck. His wife sat close beside him, one hand on his knee, the other clasping a folded tissue. He had been there for a while. Ava remembered him from earlier. Cough, fatigue, low-grade fever. Stable enough to sit and wait. Now something in his posture was different. His chin dipped toward his chest. His eyelids fluttered, then stilled. The tissue slipped from his wife's fingers and floated to the floor. "Richard," she said. "Honey?" His head tipped to the side, boneless. The hand on his knee slid away. "Richard." Her voice broke on the second call. She grabbed his shoulder and shook. In the space of a breath, the sounds of the waiting room changed. Conversations thinned. The television noise faded behind a sharper tone. "Excuse me, somebody, help!" Ava was already moving. The exam glove crinkled around her hand as she pushed through the swinging doors into the waiting area. Chairs scraped back as people tried to get out of her way. She reached the man as his wife was trying to lift his chin with trembling fingers. "Ma'am," Ava said, "I have him." She eased the wife aside without force, letting the woman's hand rest on her sleeve instead. Then she slid into the empty space and pressed her fingers to the side of the man's neck. No pulse, no rise in his chest. Her world narrowed. The holiday graphics on the television, the storm warning banner, the line at the coffee kiosk, all of it fell away. "Code blue main waiting room," she called over her shoulder. "Now." The words were clear level, solid enough to cut through the talk at the desk. At the nurse's station, Kylie jolted. The charge nurse grabbed the nearest phone and punched the code, repeating Ava's call into the overhead system. "Attention staff. Code blue emergency department waiting room. Code blue emergency department waiting room." In the security room, Marcus heard the announcement and was on his feet before the second repeat. He grabbed his radio and stepped into the hall. From his angle, he could see only the top of the older man's head over the line of chairs and Ava dropping to her knees. She laid the man flat on the floor, coat and scarf bunched under his shoulders. Her hands moved with practiced economy, one hand on the forehead, the other tilting the chin to open the airway, her ear close to his mouth for a second. No breath. She sealed her lips over his delivered 2 breaths, watched his chest rise and fall. Then she laced her fingers together and placed the heel of her hand in the center of his chest. Her shoulders stacked over her wrists, elbows straight. She started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her voice counted so only she and the man beneath her could hear. The pressure of her hands drove his sternum down with each push, the motion steady and even. Her weight worked with gravity, not against it. The wife knelt nearby, her hands hovering useless, her face wet. Someone draped an arm around her shoulders, but she did not seem to feel it. Her eyes never left Ava's hands. "Please," she whispered, "please." A little boy who had been playing with his snow globe sat still now, the toy forgotten in his lap. The glass caught the fluorescent light and sent a small broken reflection over the tiled floor. Miguel stood at the edge of the waiting room, his camera still at the nurse's station. His phone was in his pocket, untouched. He stared as if he had been dropped into a scene he did not recognize, even though it took place under the same ceiling he saw every shift. Trent came up beside him, breathing a little fast from the short run. He stopped short when he saw Ava. She did not look up. Sweat already shone at her temples despite the chill that clung to the room each time the outer doors opened. Her jaw was set, but her expression was calm. In out-count press, Marcus stepped through the doorway and moved along the wall, out of the way of staff, but close enough to see. His eyes locked on the rhythm of her shoulders. He had seen this exact pattern before in places that did not smell like sanitizer and old coffee. In his mind, the floor under Ava's knees tilted into rock and dirt. The overhead lights in the waiting room flickered into stars blurred by wind and snow. Alarms became distant gunfire, the overhead code blew, a cracked radio call in his ear. "Medic, get over here. He is not breathing. We are losing him." Over the radio that night, a woman's voice had answered. Calm, like this one. Choosing each word with care. "I have him. Keep your light on his face." On the screen back in the security room, the echo of that night showed in real time. Ava's hands pumped, pressed, kept going. The crash cart rattled through the doors, pushed by a nurse in pink scrubs. A physician came with them, already pulling gloves from his pocket. Coming through, he called. A tech laid down a backboard. Together, they slid it under the man's shoulders without stopping compressions. The doctor knelt opposite Ava, readying the airway equipment. "I have compressions," Ava said. "Breath steady. Go ahead." She did not fight for control. She did not let go until the respiratory therapist took over the chest with matching rhythm, counting under his breath now. Ava rocked back on her heels. Her knees complained, but she did not show it. She stripped off her gloves with one smooth motion and tossed them into a bin someone had dragged nearby. The world came back in layers. The television, the smell of old carpet and spilled soda, the murmurs of the onlookers, the wife's quiet sobs. Ava turned to her first. "Ma'am," she said, "they are working on him. He's in the best place he can be right now." The woman clutched her sleeve knuckles white. "You were just there," she said. "You did not even hesitate." Ava held her gaze. Blue eyes to brown, one set clear, the other blurred with tears. "He needed help," she said. "That is all." Behind them, the crash cart team loaded the older man onto a stretcher and wheeled him toward a resuscitation bay. The doctor called for labs for a 12 lead for respiratory to meet them in the room. The waiting room slowly exhaled. People sat down again, though not quite as comfortably as before. Someone picked up the fallen tissue and dropped it in a trash can. Ava stood. Her knees made a small protest in the muscles, but she pushed it aside. She walked to the nearest sink, scrubbed her hands clean again, and dried them. On the far side of the glass doors, snow attached itself to the outside world, thick and clinging. The Christmas tree lights reflected off the glass in pale colors. At the nurse's station, Kylie watched Ava approach. Her usual comments lingered unsaid, somewhere behind her teeth. "The code call sheet is here," she said instead, sliding a clipboard forward. "You have to sign as first responder." Ava took the pen. Her handwriting was neat and simple. She signed her name once and handed the board back. "You good?" Trent asked the question odd on his tongue. "I am fine," she said. She moved away before any of them could read more on her face. Marcus waited until she passed, then fell into step a little ways behind her, his boots quiet on the floor. He did not speak, only watched the line of her shoulders, the way they sat lower now, as if an old weight had settled back where it lived. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with an automated weather alert. He ignored it. On the nearest wall, a framed print of a snow-covered mountain hung crooked, the white peak lit by a painted dawn. For a moment, the picture seemed almost too familiar. He looked away and focused on the real snow pressed against the hospital's glass, and on the medic in teal scrubs walking into the bright corridor as if she had never done anything unusual at all. The next lull did not last long. The overhead speakers crackled again, this time with a different tone. It was not the sharp, focused call of a code. It was flatter, heavier. "Attention, all emergency department staff. Multiple motor vehicle collisions reported on I-5. Mass casualty incident in progress. Incoming ambulances to St. Mary's in 10 minutes. All available personnel report to your charge nurse for assignment." The words fell over the unit like a blanket. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A nurse paused with a syringe in her hand. The respiratory therapist in the lounge peeled his leftovers out of the microwave and set them aside untouched. At the nurse's station, the charge nurse uncapped her marker again. "All right," she said. "Listen up. We are full on rooms. We are opening hallway beds. I need 1 nurse at triage in the bay, 2 in trauma floaters for the halls. Kylie calls and family updates. Trent. You are with me on trauma, Ava." "Here," Ava said. She had come up quietly, hair damp, at her temples from the code scrub top, clinging slightly at the shoulders. "Bay triage," the charge nurse said. "You know the drill." Ava nodded once. "Miguel, you are transport," the charge nurse went on. "Wheelchairs, stretchers, whatever needs moving." He swallowed and nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Kylie tapped the keyboard to wake her monitor, jaw tight. "Phones are going to light up," she said under her breath. The charge nurse did not respond. She was already drawing lines between names on the board. Ava headed for the supply cabinet. She pulled a disposable gown from the box, unfurled it with a snap, and tied it at her back. She grabbed a pair of eye shields and slid the band over her ponytail. Another set of gloves snapped into place. The familiar weight of personal protective gear settled over her like a shrug she had made 1,000 times in another life. The corridor to the ambulance bay was a throat of bright light leading outward. As she walked, the hum of the building changed. The steady beeps and murmurs deepened into a low, expectant buzz. The automatic doors ahead of her opened. Night hit her in the face. Snow moved sideways in the orange sodium glow of the parking lot lamps. It rode the wind in sheets that stung any skin left exposed. 4 ambulances were already lined up, engines rumbling, red strobes painting the falling flakes in pulses of color. She stepped out into the bay, cold sliding under the hem of her gown. The concrete was slick, patched with a mix of ice and melt. Someone had thrown rock salt in uneven lines. Paramedics moved between vehicles, shouting to one another over the wind and sirens. Their jackets gleamed with reflective strips. Breath ghosted from their mouths in white puffs. Ava walked into the center of the space where she could see each rig. She adjusted her shield with a gloved knuckle. "I am triage," she called. "Bring ambulatory to the right stretcher, bound center, unresponsive, straight into trauma." One of the medics glanced over. He had snow stuck in his beard, his cheeks raw. "You got it," he said. The first ambulance doors swung open. A teenage boy sat on the edge of the stretcher seatbelt, mark across his chest, one arm cradled to his stomach. Car spun out, hit the barrier, the medic said as he helped him down. GCS 15, complaining of chest pain, on deep breath, left arm may be fractured. Ava guided the boy under the overhang. Can you walk? She asked him. Yeah, he said, teeth chattering. I think so. She placed a hand under his elbow, steady but not coddling, and steered him toward the entrance. You're going to go inside with that nurse, she told him, nodding to a staff member waiting at the door. Tell them Ava sent you. They will get an x-ray on that arm. Another rig opened. This time the patient was an older woman strapped and eyes closed. Rear passenger, mid-70s medic called. Hit from the side. Low blood pressure, borderline SATs, responds to pain. Ava stepped up on the bumper, leaning in. Her fingers pressed at the woman's neck for a pulse. Ma'am, she said, bending close. This is Ava at St. Mary's. If you can hear me, squeeze my hand. A faint pressure closed around her gloved fingers. Weak, but there. She turned to the medics. Trauma bay, she said. Now, tell them hypotensive, possible internal injuries. They rolled the stretcher down the ramp. Snow squeaked under their boots. More sirens came stacking on top of each other as new rigs turned into the drive. The air filled with flashing colors, breath shouts, the wheeze of stretcher wheels, and the crackle of radios. Inside the bay doors, Marcus held them open as staff pushed in and out. His security jacket was speckled with melt. He stood off to the side of Ava's path, taking in the layout. You good out here? He asked.
It was close enough to hear.
Fine, Ava said. Just keep the walkway clear. He nodded and moved a cluster of curious visitors back from the glass, guiding them to the side with a firm hand and a polite nod. The next patient was a man in his 30s, eyes glassy, words slurring. Driver single vehicle off the road, medic reported. He says he only had 2 beers. Smells like sick. Ava leaned in, catching the sharp edge of alcohol beneath the antiseptic and snow. Check his head, she said. That slur might not only be from the drinks. If he was belted and the airbags went off, he could have more than a hangover. The medic nodded, grateful for the catch. Will do. She sent him inside toward a monitored bed. A cluster of walking wounded formed near the entrance. People with bruises, minor cuts, dazed expressions. Ava moved among them like water. You, sir, she said, touching a man's arm lightly. Sit down, hold that cloth to your forehead. Keep pressure there. You, ma'am, deep breath for me. Does it hurt when you inhale or only when you move? Her questions were clipped, but kind. Each answer sorted someone into a new mental box, urgent. Can wait, needs imaging, needs eyes on vitals first. The wind knifed through her gown with every gust. It stung her ears, made her cheeks numb under the shield. For a heartbeat, the cold was not from Oregon at all. It was a high, thin chill on the side of a mountain wind screaming over rocks. Snow there had moved sideways, too, pulled by currents she could not see. Men had huddled behind boulders, breath frosting their balaclavas, radios hissing. We have 3 down with no cover, a voice had crackled in her ear then. We cannot move them without getting chewed up. Send me their locations, she had answered. We will find a path. Now a paramedic brushed past her shoulder, snapping her back to the present. We got 1 more in here, he called from the back of his rig. Unrestrained backseat head, laceration, possible concussion. She is awake but disoriented. A girl in her 20s blinked up at Ava when she climbed inside. Blood matted one side of the girl's hair, streaked down her ear. Her pupils were unequal. My head hurts, the girl whispered. Where is my phone? We will find it, Ava said. Tell me your name first. The girl hesitated, confused. It is okay, Ava said, softening her tone. Take your time. The name came a little slow, but it came. Ava filed it away. She pressed a gauze pad to the worst of the bleeding, mindful of the cold air sneaking in past the doors. Let us get you inside, she said. When they rolled the stretcher down, one of the medics glanced at her. You sure you are just a nurse? He asked. You run triage like my old combat medic? Ava held the doors with her shoulder as they passed through. I like things organized, she said. The medic snorted a laugh, but his eyes held something like respect. More headlights cut through the curtain of snow in the driveway. A fire engine idled near the end of the bay, its crew helping offload patients from civilian vehicles that had been flagged as too unstable to drive farther in the storm. Behind Ava, the triage table they had set up held paper tags, trauma shears, blood pressure, cuffs, spare blankets. Her gloves were already smeared with dried blood and road grime. Every so often she stripped them off, washed her hands at the utility sink just inside the door, and pulled on a fresh set. The hallway outside the bay filled with the overflow of bodies. Gurneys lined the walls, separated by thin curtains or nothing at all. Monitors beeped in slightly mismatched pitches. Nurses threaded their way through with IV bags, lab slips, and syringes. Trent hurried past, with a portable monitor in his arms, cheeks flushed. You still breathing? Ava asked as he slipped by. Did you see? Barely, he said, but there was a crooked edge to his mouth that had not been there earlier. He shifted his grip on the monitor. They just brought in a guy with a steering wheel imprint on his chest. Watch his blood pressure, she said, and his neck. Got it. Inside the lobby, Kylie's phone rang in an unbroken line of calls. She answered one after another, her usual sarcasm burned off by the sheer volume. St. Mary's emergency. This is Kylie. Yes, he is here. No, I cannot let you back right now. Yes, the doctor will talk to you as soon as possible. Between calls, her eyes strayed to the ambulances outside, to Ava's figure in the yellow gown moving like a fixed point in the swirl. Miguel pushed an empty wheelchair toward the bay, his breath fast. Where do you need this? He asked. Ava pointed. Over there by the entrance, she said. Anyone who is walking but holding their side, their shoulder, their head, sit them there first. Tell them no eating or drinking until a nurse says it is okay. He nodded, grateful for simple, direct instruction. Yes, got it. For nearly an hour, the pattern repeated. Rigs arrived unloaded. Ava sorted, directed, stepped where there was a gap, backed off where others had it under control. Her voice cut through the wind and engine noise without strain. Green tag, yellow, red, back inside, straight to trauma. Hallway bed is fine for you, sir. You are going to be sore, not broken. The cold sank through her shoes. The ache in her knees from the code returned, joined by a steady throb in her lower back. She rolled her shoulders once in the narrow shadow of the bay wall, then walked back into the light. At some point, the line of ambulances shortened. The fire crew climbed back into their engine. The sirens that came in from the distance were spaced farther apart. The sky above the bay was still a bowl of gray, but the most frantic edge of the storm had passed. Ava handed off her last new arrival, a man with a broken collarbone and an apologetic expression. Then she stepped just inside the threshold and pushed the eye shield up onto her forehead. In the security room, Marcus zoomed out the camera. The image of the bay shrank until Ava was a teal and yellow shape by the door-gloved hands resting for a moment on her hips as she looked out into the snow. He thought of the patch on her bag, of the small ink on her wrist, of the calm voice on that mountain years ago, counting compressions on a chest while rounds snapped overhead. He watched her turn away from the bay and head back into the fluorescent light, where monitors waited, and hallway beds, and a charge nurse with a marker that never seemed to run dry. The worst of the rush thinned into something almost normal. Not quiet, never that, but the kind of busy the emergency department knew what to do with. The sirens came in singles again, instead of in knots. The triage board stopped growing new names every minute. The air in the hallways settled from a shout to a hoarse whisper. In the ambulance bay, the rock salt had turned gray and slushy. Tire tracks veered in looping arcs, then disappeared under another dusting of snow. Ava slipped off the last pair of soiled gloves she had used outside and dropped them into the bin. Her hands were red and chapped from washing. She rubbed a little sanitizer between her palms anyway as she walked into the main corridor. The hallway beds were all filled. Monitors perched on rolling poles beeped at different rates, a rough, uneven choir. A line of IV bags hung like clear fruit in the bright light. Ava moved from one to the next. She adjusted an oxygen cannula on the older woman they had rushed into trauma and now kept in a hall bed, the woman's blood pressure steady, her eyelids half open. She checked the pulse on a teenage boy with a bruised chest, his breath shallow but improving. She listened to a story twice from a middle-aged man who needed to say for the third time that he had never in 50 years been in a car accident until today. She answered him with the same patience each time. At the nurse's station, Kylie entered orders into the computer shoulders, hunched from the weight of hours on the phone. A pile of sticky notes spilled across the desk, each one a callback number, a name, a relation. She pressed the receiver to her ear again. Yes, ma'am, she said. He is here. He is stable. A doctor will call you with more details as soon as they can. When she hung up, she stayed there for a moment with her eyes closed, then turned her head toward the hall. Ava was walking past Bay 3, steady, composed. Kylie watched her fingers tangled in the headset cord. She is a machine, she muttered. Not really, Miguel said from the corner of the station. He was leaning against a cabinet with his arms folded, his camera on the counter beside him, dark and idle. Machines do not tell scared people they are okay, he said. Or catch snow globes. Kylie opened her eyes and stared at him. You have been weird all night, she said. Miguel shrugged and did not argue. Trent came up behind them carrying a stack of empty chart sleeves. His cheeks were still flushed from running a portable monitor between rooms. I just saw her reroute a paramedic, he said. The guy was trying to bring a patient to a hallway bed. She took one look and sent him straight to a monitored room. Turned out his blood pressure, tanked 2 minutes later. He set the chart sleeves down a little harder than necessary. That is at least the third time tonight she has seen something before anyone else did, he added. Kylie turned her attention back to the computer screen, but her jaw flexed. In the security room, Marcus rewound one of the camera feeds. The snow behind the glass flickered in reverse, then forward again. He was not watching the storm. He was watching the way people moved through it. From this angle, Ava was a teal shape slipping between the doorway and the beds, her head bent slightly each time she checked a wristband or a monitor. The overhead lights flattened all the shadows, but even in the glare, certain patterns showed. The way she kept her back to the wall near the more agitated patients. The way she stepped wide around a dropped cup to keep from tracking liquid across the floor where someone might slip. The way her hands were never empty, always carrying a chart, a syringe, a blanket, a task. On another screen, a different memory played in the fatigue behind his eyes. A night with no glass between him and the cold. No polished floor, just rock and ice. No monitors, only the limited circle of a headlamp beam. Voices had come over the radio, then overlapped and broken, calling out landmarks and status updates in short, strained bursts. Contact front, 1 casualty. We are pinned at the outcropping. He had been a different rank then, with a rifle in his hands and a sense that the world had narrowed to the ridge and the men around him. Through all the noise, one channel had cut clearer than the rest. A medic with a voice like a steady rope. I have one with a chest wound and one with a leg. I need suppressive fire for 30 seconds to move. Reed copy his own reply had come breath-puffing in the dark. We copy, the voice had said. Do not lose them. Later, after they had scrambled down the rock and poured into cover, someone had mentioned a name. Lane. The medic who had refused to leave until the last ranger could move on his own feet. The detail had stuck with him because of the way the speaker had said it. Like he was grateful and exasperated at the same time. Now, in the harsh light of the security office, Marcus shifted in his chair and rubbed a hand over his jaw. He glanced at the list of staff names taped to the wall. Under nursing, the handwriting read, Lane Ava. His tongue felt dry. He took a sip of cold coffee and grimaced. He stood. Out in the corridor, Ava stepped into the supply room to restock an IV tray. She scanned the shelves and plucked what she needed without wasted motion metal tools, clinking softly against plastic bins. As she reached for a roll of tape, the ache in her wrist flared. She rotated it once, trying to ease the tightness, and the cuff of her sleeve pulled back. The small dark tab of ink peeked out again against pale skin. The door swung half open behind her. Need anything? A voice asked. She let her sleeve fall back into place before she turned. Just tape, she said. Miguel stood in the doorway with a box of saline flushes in his hands. He hesitated, then stepped aside to let her pass. Hey, Ava, he said as she moved by. She paused, waiting. Back in the lounge earlier, he went on. I was messing with your bag. That was not cool. I am sorry. His eyes flicked down briefly, then back up. The usual easy grin he wore had been stripped of its show. Ava studied his face. Exhaustion sat in the lines near his eyes. Some of it new, some of it older. She nodded once. Thank you for saying that, she said. She did not pat his arm or tell him it was nothing. She simply accepted the apology and walked out into the hall. He watched her go, then looked down at the saline flushes, as if surprised to see them there at all. In the staff lounge, the television still showed the weather map, but the colors were not as intense. The radar looped past the worst of the storm. A few staff leaned in the doorway with paper cups, grabbing fast sips of water or coffee between calls. Kylie slipped in and poured herself a cup from the pot. It had been on the burner too long and smelled burned, but she drank anyway. She caught her reflection in the glass of the vending machine. Hair frizzed at the edges, mascara smudged a little under her eyes. She looked tired, not in the glamorous way she sometimes posted online, but in a flat, honest way. When she walked back out, she almost collided with the older woman whose husband had gone down in the waiting room earlier. The woman stood near the nurse's station, twisting the strap of her purse in both hands. Can I help you? Kylie asked. They just took my husband to a room, the woman said. The doctor said he is stable for now. I wanted to find the nurse who started helping him, the one who was there right away. Her gaze scanned the hall, searching. Kylie swallowed. That was Ava, she said. The woman's face softened with recognition. She never hesitated, the wife said. One second I was calling for help, the next she was on the floor working on him. I wanted to say thank you. Ava's in the hall, Kylie said. You will probably see her soon. The woman nodded and drifted back toward the waiting area, eyes tracking every teal scrub top that passed. Kylie stood for a long moment after she left fingers tight around her coffee cup. Trent came up beside her, tapping a pen against his palm. The guy with the steering wheel mark is doing all right, he said. We are keeping him overnight. Good, she answered, but the word came out distant. He noticed the way she stared down the hall. You okay? He asked. She let out a breath. I kept joking about how she was trying to look important, she said. He knew who she meant. He did not pretend otherwise. Yeah, he said. But then she just does it, Kylie said. No speech, no attitude. She just goes where she is needed. Her voice carried no admiration, not exactly, and no easy disdain either. It sounded more like someone hearing a noise in a house they thought they knew and waking up to find new rooms they had never bothered to open. Trent said nothing. He spun the pen once between his fingers and tucked it behind his ear. Down the corridor, Ava leaned against the wall for a second in a narrow stretch near the fire doors. She tipped her head back until it touched the painted cinder block and closed her eyes. The sounds of the unit came through the wall, the beep of a monitor, the rattle of a cart, the murmur of a doctor updating a family just around the corner. She let one long breath slide in and out of her lungs. Muscles along her shoulders and spine released in stages slow and reluctant. Snow nights always found the old places in her body. The knee she had twisted on scree, the hip that had hit the edge of a rock when she lunged to pull someone back, the small scar near her ribs that tugged when she turned too sharply. For a brief moment, with her eyes closed, the hospital smells changed. The antiseptic faded, replaced by the mix of cordite and diesel and cold rock. Her mind supplied the rest, the crunch of her pack against ice, the weight of a man's arm over her shoulder as she half-dragged, half-carried him down a slope. "You are doing fine," she had told him then, breath burning in her throat. "Keep your feet under you. We are going home." The echo of those words brushed against the memory of what she had said tonight in the waiting room. "You are in the best place you can be right now." Different worlds, same muscle moving her mouth. A door opened at the far end of the hall. Ava opened her eyes. Marcus walked toward her, his badge clipped to his belt, his radio quiet for once. He had taken off his jacket. The navy uniform shirt underneath fit close to his frame, the name patch over his chest, simple read. He did not square his shoulders as if about to confront someone. He walked like he did on his patrols, measured, aware of every open doorway and corner. Ava pushed away from the wall. Her expression settled back into the neutral, attentive mask she wore at work. "Officer," she said in greeting as he drew near. Marcus stopped a few feet from her, giving her space. From here, he could see the fine lines of tiredness at the corners of her eyes, the small indent the mask had left on the bridge of her nose. "You holding up?" he asked. "I am fine," she said. "Busy is better than waiting." He nodded once, understanding more than the words. The overhead speakers hummed as the system reset from one announcement to the next. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed too loud for the hour, then hushed themselves. Marcus looked past her for a moment down the long line of the corridor, then back. The decision that had been circling in his chest since the first time he saw the patch on her bag finally settled. He shifted his weight onto both feet, no longer half turned away. "Staff Sergeant," he said, using the title like a key, his voice low but clear in the bright hallway. "I have a question for you." Ava looked at him, the word landing between them with more weight than the clean white hallway could show. "Staff Sergeant." She did not correct him. She did not ask how he knew. Her eyes narrowed a fraction, not in anger, but like someone bracing for a light that might be too bright. "What is your question?" she asked. Marcus held her gaze. There was a careful neutrality in his face, the kind you learned when too much showed at the wrong time. "Were you with Task Force Sentinel Ridge?" he said. "Christmas Eve, Kunar Province." The fluorescent hum above them seemed to grow louder for a heartbeat, then thin out into nothing. The words left his mouth and hung in the space sharper than any page in her file. The noise of the unit flowed around them, but something shifted. A tech pushing a portable X-ray cart slowed. A nurse coming up the hall with a tray of meds glanced over. The older man in the wheelchair near the wall, the one with a Ranger Regiment cap balanced on his knees, lifted his head. Ava did not answer right away. It had been years since she had heard those 3 syllables in that order spoken out loud by anyone who was not inside her own head. Sentinel Ridge. Snow under her boots. Dark rock cutting the pads of her fingers through thin gloves. A radio pressed to her ear with a voice asking if they were going to make it. The bitter taste of air, thin with altitude and thick with cordite. Her jaw flexed once. She dropped her gaze to the side for a second, as if making sure the floor was still there, then brought it back to Marcus. "Yes," she said. "I was there." She did not add more. No rank, no role, no details. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Marcus straightened. His heels came together on the tile with a small, clear tap. His shoulders settled into a line that belonged to another uniform under another flag. His right hand rose in a crisp arc and came to rest at his brow. The salute was not casual. It was not the slight lift of fingers people sometimes offered to security out of habit. It was precise and clean, fingers joined, thumb, tucked, wrist, straight, elbow, angled, just so. He held it. The corridor around them fell silent sound, folding in on itself like fabric. At the nurse's station, Kylie felt the hush before she saw the cause. Her fingers stopped on the keyboard. She looked up and saw Marcus at attention, saw Ava standing opposite him, caught in the center of a circle that had not been there a moment ago. Trent turned from the printer's eyebrows pulling together. Miguel, on his way back from returning, a wheelchair stopped mid-step. Inside one of the side rooms, a young man in a marine hoodie sat up on his gurney. He had been scrolling on his phone, bored and restless, but the sight of a salute in a hospital hallway snagged his attention. The older man in the wheelchair with the ranger cap pushed his palms against the armrests and levered himself up. It took effort. His legs shook. He got as straight as he could and did not reach for the chair again. A family in the waiting area behind the glass looked over their conversation, tapering off when they saw how many people had gone still. Ava's hand twitched at her side, an old reflex waking. She had not been on the receiving end of many salutes. Most of her work had been done in places where rank dissolved into survival, and anyone with hands and training did what needed doing. She did not like being watched. The corridor pressed in thick with eyes and air that suddenly seemed too warm. Her first instinct was to step back to break the line of sight, to slip out of the frame. Instead, she set her feet a little more firmly on the floor. She let the strap of her stethoscope dig into the back of her neck and made herself hold the space. She lowered her chin, drew in a breath, and lifted her right hand. Her fingers found the brim of an invisible patrol cap. The motion was simple and unadorned. No flourish, no delay, just one professional answering another. For a few seconds, the two of them stood there, like that staff and patients and families, forming a loose ring at a respectful distance. Then Marcus dropped his hand. His fingers brushed his thigh and stilled. He looked at her eyes steady. "Ma'am," he said, voice pitched a little louder now, so it carried beyond the small bubble of their conversation. "With your permission, I would like to tell them who you are." She swallowed. The muscles in her throat moved. "You do not have to," she said. "I know," he answered. "That is why I'm asking." She glanced once at the faces around them. The ranger cap, the Marine hoodie, the woman whose husband she had done compressions on standing at the corner of the nurse's station with a crumpled tissue in her fist. Kylie frozen in place, Trent still holding a half-filled paperwork tray, Miguel hands empty. Her life had lived in silence for so long that giving it sound felt like opening a door that might slam shut on her fingers. She nodded once. "All right," she said quietly. Marcus turned slightly enough to include more of the hallway in his field of view. He clasped his hands behind his back. When he spoke, his tone did not change from its usual evenness, but something in it gathered the attention around him like a net. "This is Staff Sergeant Ava Lane," he said. He did not look at Kylie when he spoke, or at Trent or Miguel, but all three of them flinched as if their names had been called in a roll. 12 years ago, he went on a Christmas Eve a lot colder than this one there were, rangers pinned on a ridge in Kunar province, weather rolling and no visibility worth talking about enemy fire on the high ground. The man in the ranger cap closed his eyes for a second. His jaw tightened. They were not supposed to be there that long, Marcus said. They were not supposed to be stuck with that little cover. They sure were not supposed to get off that mountain alive. His own memories colored the edges of the story, but he kept to what he knew was true. Task Force, Sentinel Ridge went up anyway, he said. Small team, bad odds. I was with the support unit in the valley. We heard the radio traffic. We heard the part where it went quiet for a while, and we all thought the worst. On the gurney in the side room, the young Marine sat forward, forearms on his knees, earbuds dangling unused now. Marcus's gaze returned to Ava for a moment, then back to the loose circle of listeners. And then we heard a voice come back on the net, he said. Calm, always calm, calling in updates, requesting fire on specific targets, asking for one more minute. Here, 30 seconds there to move guys who were hit. He tilted his head as if he could still hear it under the faint beep of monitors and the distant hiss of the snow outside. We heard her, he said. The ranger vet's eyes shone now. He waited without moving, as if putting pressure on his own memory could bring more detail into focus. We heard Marcus continued that they were moving injured men down in that cold you feel when you step outside here, times 10, that they carried those rangers over ice and rock while rounds snapped over their heads, that they kept going when any sane person would have stopped. He did not mention the names of those who had not made it. This was not the place for that. Most of them came off that ridge alive, he said. They made it to more Christmases, saw more porch lights, because people like Staff Sergeant Lane refused to break. A murmur passed through the hallway, not loud but full. Someone inhaled sharply, the sound catching. Ava stood still. Shoulders squared, eyes not quite on Marcus, now not quite on the people around them either. Her focus had slid somewhere just past all of it to a place only she could see. She could feel every heartbeat in her chest, each one a little heavier than the last. The fluorescent lights above her buzzed. The smell of sanitizer tangled with the scent memory of burned powder and wet wool. She hated this. At the same time, she recognized something in Marcus's words, a curve of honesty that matched the shape of her own nights. She shook her head, a small movement as if dislodging frost. I was not the only one there, she said. A lot of people did a lot of things that night. Marcus inclined his head. That is true, he said. Good teams are like that. He took in a breath, then added more quietly, though still loud enough to carry. But when you are in the valley listening and you hear voices go from goodbye to we are moving, that sticks with you. Silence settled over the corridor again, thicker this time, layered with thoughts instead of surprise. The wife of the older man from the waiting room stepped closer, lips parted. The Marine in the hoodie came to the doorway of his room, forepole squeaking as he dragged it. The Ranger veteran reached for his cap and set it on his head with deliberate care. Without anyone telling them to the service members in sight, straightened. The Marine stood a little taller, shoulders back. The older Ranger vet lifted his chin. A middle-aged woman in a hoodie with an Air Force logo on it slipped her phone into her pocket and placed a hand over her chest. They did not know all of Ava's story. They did not need to. Miguel's throat felt tight. He swallowed, and it did nothing to ease it. The image of Ava's hand catching the snow globe, Ava's knees on the waiting room floor, Ava standing in the ambulance bay, with snow in her hair stacked one on top of the other, in his mind. Kylie's fingers loosened on the edge of the counter. Her phone sat face down beside the keyboard, forgotten. Her earlier words about thrift store bags and fake importance bounced in the back of her head louder now than any overhead announcement. Trent shifted his weight, the habitually relaxed set of his shoulders gone. He looked at Ava and saw not the worn sneakers and old canvas, but the way she had moved through the last hours. No hesitation, no drama, just a straight line from one need to the next. Ava drew in a careful breath. "I was just doing my job," she said. The words came out the same as they had in her debrief all those years ago when someone she did not know had shaken her hand in a tent and said something about courage and exemplary service. Back then, she had been half asleep on her feet, still tasting dust, her hands still remembering the weight of other people's lives. Now in a hospital corridor lined with holiday decorations and plastic garland, she said it again. Marcus looked at her, then at the people around them. Maybe he said, but some jobs change the number of porch lights that stay on. His attention returned fully to her face. "Thank you for what you did on that ridge." "Staff Sergeant Lane," he said. He did not raise his hand again. Once had been enough. The respect now lived in his posture, in the way he stood in front of her, as if holding a line others could not see. Ava's gaze flicked to the side to the cluster of staff and patients and family members who were still watching. Their expressions varied, but one thing was the same in all of them. They were seeing her differently. She did not know what to do with that. Her fingers brushed the edge of her scrub pocket, grounding herself in the familiar feel of fabric and the small weight of a pen clipped there. Behind her, a monitor beeped down twice in a pattern she recognized as a warning, not an alarm. Work tugged at her sleeve like a patient calling for help. She took a breath, held it for half a count, then let it out. "All right," she said softly. "We still have people to take care of." The spell cracked, but did not vanish. The hallway slowly began to move again. Nurses turned back to their carts. A doctor stepped out of a room and called for a set of labs. The Marine shuffled back toward his bed, IV pole in hand. The Ranger vet stayed on his feet a moment longer. His eyes did not leave Ava's face even as she turned toward the nearest room in need of her. He lifted his hand, fingers trembling just a little, and touched the brim of his cap in a small private salute. That was his alone to give. The Ranger veteran's hand dropped back to his side, fingers curling around the armrest of his chair as he lowered himself with care. His knees protested the descent. He let them. In front of him, Ava stepped into the nearest room. The curtain rings clinked softly as she drew the fabric halfway closed. Her voice, low and even, drifted out. "How is your pain now, sir?" In the corridor, the current of movement resumed, but not at its old pace. People walked a little more quietly. Eyes lingered a heartbeat longer when they passed the nurse's station. Kylie stared down at her monitor without really seeing the screen. The cursor blinked over an empty field. Documentation could not fill itself. It waited on her fingers. Behind the computer glare, images flickered. Ava catching the snow globe. Ava on the floor with her hands on a stranger's chest. Ava outside in the snow giving orders while red and blue light washed over her. Ava standing in the hallway a moment ago, caught in the circle of the past, finally spoken out loud. Kylie's hands moved, but not to type. She set them flat on the counter for a second, palms pressing against the cool laminate. She left the keyboard and stepped back from the desk. "Where are you going?" Trent asked. He was sorting paperwork into piles, trying to look busy. The lines at the corners of his mouth gave him away. "I am going to find her," Kylie said. Her voice did not leave space for commentary. She walked down the hall, eyes searching each open doorway. In the second room on the left, she found Ava adjusting an IV drip for the older woman who had been in the accident, the one who had come out of trauma alive and surprised. The woman's blood pressure was better now. Her cheeks held more color. She watched Ava's hands with something like awe. "You move like you have done this in a war," the woman said. Ava checked the clamp on the tubing, then glanced up with a hint of a wry smile. "Traffic tonight was enough," she said. The woman chuckled, a weak sound, but real. Kylie waited until Ava stepped away from the bedside. "Nurse Lane," she said. Ava turned. "Yes." There was no impatience in the single syllable, only the quiet readiness she offered to everyone. Kylie's throat felt dry. She took a breath. "About earlier," Kylie said. "About the bag and the jokes and all of it." She met Ava's eyes, making herself stay there. "I was out of line," Kylie said. "Completely." I did not know anything, and I still went ahead and ran my mouth anyway. I am sorry. The room hummed with its own sounds. The monitor over the bed ticked out a steady rhythm. The old woman shifted under the blankets, watching. Ava studied Kylie's face, makeup smudged hair, escaping its clip eyes, tired and honest. The younger woman looked different up close than she did from behind the glow of a phone screen. Thank you for saying that, Ava replied. No anger, no sarcasm, no easy absolution. I was trying to be funny, Kylie added the words, coming in a rush now that she had started. You did not deserve any of it. Ava's gaze softened by a degree. Just be careful with that kind of funny, she said. You never know what it lands on. Kylie nodded quickly. I will, she said. She stepped back, nearly bumping into Trent in the doorway. He had followed but hung back until now the chart he held suddenly feeling like a prop. He cleared his throat. Nurse Lane, he said. She turned toward him. Yeah. Trent shifted the chart from one hand to the other. I am sorry for touching your bag earlier, he said, and for the things I said in the lounge. It was stupid. The word felt strange in his mouth. He was not used to pointing it at himself. Ava tilted her head, waiting. I thought I knew what I was looking at, he said, but I did not. Not even close. She let his admission sit for a moment. Then she nodded. Thank you, she said again. He glanced past her at the older woman in the bed, then back. There was a flush on his neck that had nothing to do with the heat of the unit. Miguel stood in the hall, just beyond one hand on the doorframe. He stepped forward when the others moved aside. His camera was not with him. His phone was in his pocket, screen dark. Hey, Ava, he said. She did not flinch away from the use of her first name this time. Miguel, she acknowledged. He rubbed his thumb against his palm, searching for words that did not sound like a script. I recorded you, he said, earlier, in the lounge, out here. I thought it would make good content. I was wrong. He met her eyes squarely. I deleted everything he said. Every clip, even the backups. I am sorry. A shadow of something passed through her expression. Not suspicion, not disbelief. Just the faint ache of someone hearing the word sorry more times in one night than they had in months. All right, she said. I appreciate you telling me. She looked from one face to the next. It is not about me, she said. Not really. It is about the next person you decide you know because of their shoes or their bag or their hair. Her tone stayed easy, but the meaning was plain. Do better with them, she said. That would be enough. Kylie swallowed. We will, she said. Trent nodded. Yeah, he added. We will. Miguel gave a short, firm nod of his own. Promise. A nurse in pink scrubs poked her head in the room. Lane, she said. The wife of your code blue is asking for you at the station, if you have a second. Ava inclined her head. I'm on my way, she said. She turned back to the patient, checked the monitor one more time, then stepped into the hall. The trio parted without thinking, giving her a clear path through. As she walked away, none of them reached for their phones. For a moment, they just stood there, three figures in worn and new scrubs watching the space she left behind. At the nurse's station, the older woman with the crumpled tissue was waiting. Her hands worried the paper into softer and softer shreds. When she saw Ava, her shoulders sagged with something like relief. Nurse Lane, she said, I did not want to keep you, but I wanted to say thank you. They told me if you had not started compressions when you did, he might not have made it until the team got there. Ava shook her head slightly. There were a lot of people working on him, she replied. The woman nodded quickly. I know, she said. I saw them, but you were first. I will not forget that. Her fingers reached out, then hesitated, then settled lightly on Ava's forearm, just below the sleeve's edge. You look so calm, the woman said, voice wobbling. I was falling apart, and you sounded like you knew he was going to be okay. Ava thought of the dozens of times that had not been true, the times when no amount of calm voice had changed what was happening under her hands. Tonight, the man in the room down the hall was breathing. A monitor traced his heartbeat in gentle spikes. His wife's hand would not close around air when she reached for him. I'm glad he is here, Ava said simply. The woman's eyes filled again. So am I, she whispered. She let go of Ava's arm, dabbed at her face with the shredded tissue, and stepped aside. A small figure appeared at her hip. It was a girl of maybe 6 or 7 in fleece pajamas patterned with snowmen under a puffy purple coat. Her hair was pulled into 2 uneven ponytails. She held something in her mittened hand, gripping it tight. Go on, the woman murmured, giving her a gentle nudge. The girl took a deep breath and walked up to Ava. Her boots squeaked softly on the floor. She opened her hand. A slightly bent candy cane lay in her palm, still wrapped in clear plastic, the red and white stripes bright under the overhead lights. This is for you, the girl said. She looked up, brown eyes wide and serious. Thank you for helping people come home. The words were simple. They brushed directly against the oldest place inside Ava, the one that remembered men leaning on her shoulders, their boots dragging in snow while they muttered names under their breath like a broken rosary. Her throat tightened. She had to swallow before she could speak. Thank you, she answered, her voice softer than it had been all night. That is very kind. She accepted the candy cane with both hands. Its small weight in her palm felt oddly heavy. "Merry Christmas," the girl said. "Merry Christmas," Ava replied. The girl smiled quickly, a flash of teeth and bravery, then retreated to her mother's side. The woman gave Ava one more look filled with gratitude she could not put fully into words, then guided her daughter back toward the waiting area. Ava turned the candy cane over, once between her fingers. The plastic crinkled faintly. Red, white, and clear, like so many things she had seen stained and blurred under different lights. She slipped it into the chest pocket of her scrub top, the curve of it pressing lightly against her collarbone. Behind the station, Miguel watched the exchange. He felt his hand drift toward his pocket, instinctively reaching for his phone, then stopped it halfway and let it fall. Some scenes did not belong on screens. Marcus approached the desk from the other side, a clipboard in one hand. His eyes went to the candy cane tucked into Ava's pocket, then to her face. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly. She gave a small nod. "For the moment," she said. The charge nurse stepped up next with a stack of updated assignments. "Lane," she said, "when you catch a breather, I need to talk staffing with you." Ava took the top sheet, scanning it. The letters swam a little. She blinked and the lines settled. "Sure," she said. The station buzzed back into motion around them. Phones rang, printers spat out orders. A new patient at the triage desk coughed and apologized for it. In the middle of it for just a second, Ava placed her hand over the pocket where the candy cane rested. Her palm rested there, feeling the small curve through the thin fabric, the shape of thanks given without any agenda. Then she lifted her hand away and reached for the next chart. The shift clock did not care about storm warnings or mass casualties. It rolled forward like it always did, minute by minute, while monitors beeped and staff moved and fluorescent lights hummed. Sometime after 2 in the morning, the charge nurse slid a fresh stack of assignment sheets onto the station counter. "Lane," she said, "got a second now?" Ava set down the chart she was updating and wiped a thumb over the ink where it had smudged. "Yeah," she answered. They stepped a few paces away from the traffic of the desk into the narrow space by the medication cabinet. The noise of the unit softened there, made smaller by the walls. The charge nurse, Ms. Cole, had lines at the corners of her mouth, etched by years of night shifts and coffee. Her ponytail was shorter than Ava's and mostly gray. She crossed her arms, a clipboard balanced in one hand. "You have been picking up travel shifts with us for 6 months, Cole said. "A little more," Ava replied. Cole nodded. Her eyes flicked over Ava's shoulder toward the hall, then back. "You know this place," she said. "You know how we move when it is slow and when we are drowning. You make my life a lot easier out there." Ava took that in with a small dip of her chin. Compliments always felt like something she should set on a shelf and not touch. "Thank you," she said. Cole shifted the clipboard so that the top paper showed. "We had 2 resignations this week," she said. "One med-surg, one ER. I talked to administration. I told them I would rather not train another brand new nurse from scratch if I could help it." The corners of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "I gave them a name," she said. "Yours." Ava's fingers curled around the edge of the assignment sheet she still held. "A permanent slot," Cole continued. "Full-time, benefits, set schedule. No more last-minute agency calls asking if you can drive across town for a 12-hour shift at some place you have never seen." A voice down the hall called for a blood draw, then faded into the background again. The fluorescent lights hummed on. "You are offering me a position," Ava said. Cole nodded once. "Here," she said. "In this department, if you want it." The words landed in her chest with a weight she had not expected. So much of her life since she had taken off the uniform had been temporary. Temporary apartments, temporary jobs, temporary shifts at hospitals that forgot her name as soon as the contract ended and the last box was checked. Here the air smelled of bleach and burnt coffee and storm damp. Here they had seen her bag her scars, her hands on a stranger's chest. They had heard a version of what she had done before she wore teal scrubs. She had not come to St. Mary's looking for Roots. She had come because they needed a night nurse, and she needed hours. Now Roots were being offered anyway. "You do not owe us an answer right this second," Cole said. "Administration needs the paperwork, but they can wait a day or 2. Ava glanced past her at the whiteboard with patient names and room numbers at the line of hallway beds at the staff moving through the glow. "What is the catch?" she asked. Cole snorted softly. "You keep doing what you already do," she said. "You get paid a little better. And when the snow hits the fan, you are on the text chain like the rest of us." Ava almost smiled at that. "I can live with that," she said. Cole's expression eased. "So is that a yes?" she asked. Ava hesitated only long enough to feel the weight of the candy cane against her chest pocket, the press of its curve through the fabric. Her father's text from earlier floated back into her mind. "Porch light is on. No rush, just get here safe." "Yes," she said. "It is." Cole nodded as if she had expected that answer all along. "I will start the paperwork," she said. "Welcome to the team officially." She clapped Ava once on the shoulder, a quick firm touch, then headed back to the board to rearrange names with someone permanent in mind. Ava stood still for a moment, letting the new reality sink into the cracks of everything else. Permanent. She did not say the word out loud. It sat quietly in her chest, unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. She went back to work. A few rooms later, she checked the older man from the waiting room. His face had more color than before. His chest rose and fell under the hospital gown. The monitor traced his heart rhythm in regular patterns. His wife had fallen asleep in the chair beside the bed, tissue still clutched in her hand. Ava adjusted the blanket over the man's legs, careful not to wake either of them. She glanced once at the screen, noted the numbers, then slipped out. In the security office, the screens showed different slices of the same night. Snow thick on the parking lot. Plow trucks moving in slow circuits. The ambulance bay quieter now, its concrete floor streaked with melt. Marcus stood in front of the bank of monitors with his hands on his hips. The overhead light made small halos on his closely clipped hair. He reached for the mouse and clicked open a staff record. Lines of text appeared. Emergency contact, certifications, date of hire, agency affiliation. He read the name under contact carefully. Thomas Lane, relationship father. He considered the phone number beside it, the digits simple and ordinary. This was not protocol. No manual told security officers to use emergency contacts for anything except emergencies. No rule book had a chapter on what to do when you realized a person whose life had once intersected your radio waves now worked down the hall from you. He picked up the phone anyway. The line rang twice, 3 times, a fourth. On the 5th ring, a tired voice answered. "Hello?" Sir Marcus said. His voice came out calmer than he felt. "My name is Marcus Reed. I am calling from St. Mary's Medical Center in Portland. Is this Mr. Thomas Lane?" There was a pause, a small rustle as if someone was sitting up in bed reaching for a pair of glasses. "Yes," the voice said. "This is Thomas. Is my daughter all right?" He rushed the last words, fear carving through sleep. "She is fine," Marcus said quickly. "I am sorry, I should have said that first. She is safe. She is working." Another silence, this one softer. "All right," Thomas said. "You gave me a scare." Marcus glanced at the monitor where Ava was a small teal figure moving from one room to the next. "I work security here," he said. "I served in the Navy. I was stationed near Cunard for a bit. I heard about Sentinel Ridge back then." On the other end, Thomas blew out a slow breath. "I heard a little about it," he said. "Not from her. From other people who called long after the fact." He chuckled once the sound frayed but fond. "She does not talk much about any of it," he added. "I figured," Marcus said. He cleared his throat. "I just wanted to tell you, he said that your daughter is over here on Christmas Eve taking care of a whole lot of people who would be in a bad way without her. She has been busy, and she has been solid. I have seen that before in other places with other men and women I respected." He hesitated, then continued. "You are a lucky man, Mr. Lane," he said. The line went quiet except for the soft sound of someone drawing in air. "Thank you," Thomas said at last. His voice had changed. It carried something like tears wrapped in gratitude. "Thank you for telling me that." Marcus felt his own throat catch for a heartbeat. "Yes, sir," he said. "That is all I called to say. I hope you both have a good Christmas when she gets off." "We will," Thomas replied. "The porch light is on." Marcus smiled small and unseen. "I think she knows," he said. They said goodbye. The line clicked off. Marcus set the phone back in its cradle, then looked once more at the screens. On the hallway, camera Ava was standing by the station, listening to something Cole was saying while pointing at the assignment board. The candy cane in her pocket was just visible, a curved outline under the thin, teal fabric. He watched for another few seconds, then picked up his radio and stepped back out into the waking hospital. By 3:30, the edges of the night began to blur. Staff moved with a slower drag to their feet. Patients who could sleep did mouths open faces slack under yellowed light. The Christmas tree in the waiting room blinked through its pattern of colors without anyone watching. The storm outside eased. The snow that fell now came in smaller flakes, drifting instead of driving. Plows had carved channels in the parking lot. The main roads glimmered with a crust of salt. At the nurse's station, the wall clock ticked louder in Ava's awareness. The minute hand climbed toward the end of her shift. The candy cane in her pocket had warmed against her skin. Her hands were dry and tired. Her feet hummed with a steady ache. She finished her last set of charting, double-checked that each pain score had a plan attached. Each set of vitals had a note. She signed off on the code blue documentation, initialed a lab result, and set her pen down. Cole appeared at her elbow. "You are off in 30, she said. "Go clock out on time. We have coverage." "You sure?" Ava replied. "Yes," Cole said. "That is an order." A hint of humor threaded through her tone. Ava almost laughed. Almost. "All right," she said. She did one more round, the habit too deep to break. She looked in on the ranger vet who had fallen asleep in his chair, cap tipped forward over his eyes. The Marine in the hoodie snored softly on his gurney, his IV fluid almost finished. The older woman from the accident slept too, her breaths slow and even. In the room where the older man lay, the monitor still traced tidy hills of heartbeat. His wife had pulled a blanket over her legs and leaned her head back against the wall neck at an awkward angle. Ava slid a folded towel under the woman's head as a makeshift pillow without waking her. Then she stepped away. In the locker room, she spun the dial on her locker and opened it. The familiar smell of antiseptic soap and worn canvas greeted her. Her bag sat on the shelf, the faded patch catching the fluorescent light. She reached up and laid her fingers over it, thumb brushing the frayed edge of the stitching. For years, that patch had been her only constant. Now, for the first time in a long while, it shared space with something else that might last. She tucked her stethoscope inside the bag, folded her spare scrub top, and zipped it shut. The sound of the zipper was small, but satisfying. She changed into her parka, pulling it over her scrub top, and stepped back into the hall with the bag strap over her shoulder. On her way past the station, a young doctor looked up from his chart. "Night, Lane," he said. "Good night," she answered. The Marine lifted a hand from his gurney and gave her a tired thumbs up when she passed his door. "Thank you," he said. Ava nodded once. "Rest," she replied. Kylie caught her eye from behind the computer. "Merry Christmas, Nurse Lane," she said. Ava dipped her head. "Merry Christmas, Kylie." Trent raised a hand in a half wave. "See you next shift," he said. Miguel simply said, "Take care, Ava." "You too," she replied. Marcus waited near the double doors that led toward the main exit and the staff lot. He had his jacket back on radio at his shoulder. "Heading out?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "For a few hours at least." He nodded. "Be safe out there, Staff Sergeant," he said. She gave him a small, real smile, the kind that did not quite reach full brightness, but carried warmth anyway. "You too, Chief," she said. The doors to the lobby opened with a soft sigh when she approached. The waiting room lights had been dimmed. The television played another movie, now its sound low. The Christmas tree glowed in the corner, its reflection caught in the dark glass of the front doors. Ava crossed the tile, her sneakers whispering against the floor. The canvas bag bumped lightly against her hip. The candy cane rested against her collarbone, a small, curved reminder of a girl in a purple coat and a simple sentence. "Thank you for helping people come home." She reached the main entrance and paused for a moment, looking out at the parking lot. Snow lay in uneven blankets over the cars. Street lamps painted the drifts in pale gold. The sky held the first hint of light at the horizon, not sunrise yet, but the idea of it. She took a breath, tightened her grip on the strap of her bag, and pushed the door open into the cold. Cold wrapped around her as soon as she stepped outside. It slid under her parka and bit at the damp fabric of her scrub pants. The air smelled clean in a way the hospital never did, like metal and pine and leftover storm. Her breath lifted in small clouds. Snow had settled on the parking lot in uneven rolls where the plows had pushed it aside. Tire ruts cut dark tracks between white banks. A few cars idled exhaust-drifting headlights on low. A pickup sat near the edge of the lot, paint the faded blue of old denim. The engine was running. Frost rimmed the windshield, melted in streaks where the wipers had cleared, just enough to see. The driver door opened. A man climbed out, pulling his coat tighter as the wind grabbed at it. His hair was white at the temples and thin on top. His shoulders had sloped more since Ava had last seen him up close, but his walk was the same, a quiet, careful roll that came from years on his feet in a machine shop. He paused for a second, eyes scanning the entrance, then found her. For all the words that had been spoken about her that night, none of them matched the simple line on his face when he saw his daughter. "There you are," he said. His voice came out rough with cold and something else. Ava stepped forward, boots crunching in the snow. The canvas bag bounced against her side. She stopped within arm's reach. "Hi, Dad," she said. They looked at each other for a heartbeat, taking in the small changes, new lines at the corner of his eyes, a few more silver threads in her hair. Then he opened his arms. She stepped into them. He wrapped her in a hug that absorbed some of the cold, his coat smelling of wood smoke and laundry detergent and the faint oil of old tools. Her forehead settled against his shoulder. For a moment, the ache in her back, her knees, her wrist, all of it blurred into the sense of being held. "You all right?" he asked into her hair. "Yeah," she said. "Tired." He eased back enough to look at her face. "It was a mess on the roads," he said. "I figured they would keep you." "They did," she replied. He smiled a little. "They are smart," he said. She huffed out a small breath that was almost a laugh. He reached up and brushed a thumb under one of her eyes where the skin had grown shadowed. "You look like you worked," he said. "We did," she answered. He nodded, accepting that, then tilted his head toward the truck. "Come on," he said, "before we both freeze out here." He took her bag without asking and slung it across his own shoulder. It looked right there, the old canvas against his worn coat, as if it had sat on that frame before. She slid into the passenger seat. The vinyl was cracked where years of use had split it. but it was warm. The heater roared, blowing hot air that smelled faintly of antifreeze. He put the bag on the back seat and climbed in. His fingers thicker now wrapped around the steering wheel. The pickup's dash was lit in soft green, the fuel gauge hovering above a quarter tank. They pulled out of the hospital lot. The building loomed in the rearview mirror, all glass and light, a bright block against the dark. Ava watched it recede, the emergency bay tucked around the side, the windows of the waiting room glowing the top of the Christmas tree, just visible through one pane. Somewhere behind those walls, monitors beeped. Nurses walked and people slept under scratchy blankets. Thomas drove slowly, tires humming over the wet road. The snow along the sides of the street rose in plowed ridges. Traffic lights hung above each intersection, their colors softened by lingering flakes. "How were the highways?" she asked. "I took the long way," he said. "Side streets. No need to wrestle with the big stuff. Police had the on-ramps blocked anyway for a while." He checked his mirror, then added more quietly, "I got a call from one of your coworkers." Ava turned her head. "Marcus," she said. "Yeah," Thomas replied. "Said he worked security, said he served, said he heard about something you did a long time ago." His hands tightened a little on the wheel. "You did not have to let anyone talk about that," he said. "It sort of happened," she said. "I did not start it." He glanced at her briefly, then put his eyes back on the road. "You never do," he said. She looked out the window. The city slid by in dark shapes and scattered lights. A diner threw a square of yellow onto the snow, where a single truck sat in the lot. Holiday decorations drooped a little on lampposts weighed down by ice. They sat in comfortable quiet for a few miles. "I heard what he said, though," Thomas went on, "about those men on the mountain." He cleared his throat. "Somebody from the regiment called me years back after it happened," he said. "They told me some of it. I did not ask for more. I figured if you wanted me to know, you would tell me yourself." He smiled ruefully. "You never did," he said. Snow bumped under the tires as they rolled over a patch the plows had missed. "There is not a lot to say," Ava replied. He let that sit between them. He knew there was more, but he also knew the shape of her silences. He had learned over time which ones to press on and which ones to lean against until they eased on their own. He glanced at her again. "I am proud of you, you know," he said. She looked down at her hands. The skin on her knuckles was dry, a little cracked from washing. In the hospital, people had been saying thank you all night. The words had bounced off the armor she wore there, thin or thick, depending on how the hours went. Here the simple line of his voice slipped through. "I know," she said. The road out of town grew narrower. Houses stood back from the street, their yards piled with snow. Some were dark. Others glowed with porch lights and strings of colored bulbs. They turned onto the small street where she had grown up. The tires crunched over the familiar curve. Halfway down the block, a modest house sat on a slight rise, its roof sagging a little in the middle. A light burned over the front door, casting a warm cone across the steps and onto the snow. The porch light. Thomas slowed and pulled into the short drive. The truck's headlights swept across the front of the house and died when he turned the key. The engine ticked as it cooled. For a moment, neither of them moved. The quiet felt bigger here than it had in the hospital parking lot. No sirens, no intercom. Just the faint hiss of wind through bare branches and the distant scrape of a snow shovel on another street. He turned in his seat to look at her. "They offered me a job," she said before he could speak. "A permanent one. In the ER." His eyebrows went up. "They would be fools not to," he said. She huffed out a breath. "I said yes," she added. He smiled, lines deepening around his eyes. "Good," he said. "Maybe I will see a little more of you on nights that are not emergencies." She looked at the house, at the light. "Yeah," she said. "Maybe." They climbed out of the truck. The cold bit again, but softer here. Their boots left prints in the unbroken snow between the driveway and the steps. At the bottom of the porch, Ava paused. The light above them hummed a warm gold circle cutting into the blue of early morning. She tipped her head back and looked up at it. The bulb glowed steady, no flicker. She imagined her father flipping the switch hours earlier when the storm was still heavy and the roads worse, making good on the text he had sent. "Porch light is on." She reached into her pocket and felt the shape of the candy cane through the fabric. It had bent a little more from being there, but it was whole. Her fingers brushed the curve, then dropped to the strap of her bag. The old patch was hidden under her coat, now pressed between her shoulder and the canvas. 2 small pieces of cloth and sugar, holding 2 parts of her life, in a line she could finally stand on without feeling it tilt. Thomas opened the front door. Warm air rolled out, carrying the smell of coffee ham in the oven cinnamon. The living room beyond was lit the small artificial tree in the corner, glowing with colored lights and mismatched ornaments they had collected over decades. He stood aside. "After you," he said. She climbed the steps and crossed the threshold. The door closed behind them with a soft click, shutting out the cold and the leftover noise of the night. Inside, the quiet had a different feel. Softer around the edges. A couch with an old blanket thrown over the back. a framed photograph of a younger Ava in a high school soccer uniform, a small stack of wrapped gifts under the tree. She set her bag down by the wall. It slumped there, canvas folding in on itself, the patch turned inward. For once, she did not feel the need to pick it back up. Thomas headed for the kitchen. "Sit," he said over his shoulder. "I will make coffee. Real coffee, not whatever they have in those machines." Ava sank onto the couch. The cushions sighed under her weight. Her body felt both heavy and oddly light, like something she had been carrying without noticing had eased. She reached into her pocket, took out the candy cane, and laid it on the coffee table. Red and white lines glowed under the tree lights. Outside, the porch light stayed on its warm circle, touching the snow that stretched out toward the street. In the distance, the hospital sat on its hill windows, still bright against the fading night. Ava leaned back, let her head rest on the cushion, and listened to the sounds of her father moving in the kitchen. Cabinets opening and closing, water running, the soft clink of a mug set on the counter. She closed her eyes, not because she was bracing for anything, but because for the first time in longer than she could measure, she could. The light over the porch shone through the curtains at the edge of her vision, a steady glow against the dim. It was still on. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.